So, good evening, everybody. And this is the long promised video by us about the Brazilian contexts at the Venice Biennale this year. So, earlier this April, I visited the opening of the Venice Biennale, so the two main opening days, and had a chance to go through the majority of the shows that were there. And frankly, I had a very conflicting opinion. At the same time, I was very, very happy to see such a wide representation of normally underrepresented artistic groups. And it was very nice to see art that is exhibited outside of the traditional mediums. For example, there was a lot of works on textiles, which are, of course, native to a lot of people and nations that were there, but also at the same time, a lot of contemporary art. But overall, especially when talking with journalists, I've heard a lot of different questions and I guess a lot of misunderstanding regarding the vision of the curator, Adriana Pedrosa. And so today we decided to talk about some of those, especially in the context of the Brazilian background of the curator, given that he is the director of the São Paulo Museum of Contemporary Art. And
it's actually very important, Sonia, that he is the first Latin American curator for the Venice Biennale. So I think in terms of, I don't know, geopolitical situation, it's very important, and that Brazil and the whole continent has to be represented and be known, I think, much more in events like Venice Biennale, which one of the most important events now of contemporary art. So in that sense, I think it's a good news and good achievement for the whole Latin American scene.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And the curation of the show was very evidently South American, which was very refreshing to see. And I guess this is why, I guess, where a lot of confusion kind of comes from, because to a Western audience, it's not really a very familiar context to see. But the title of the Biennale, so I want to start with the title. It is Foreigners Everywhere, which of course in the curatorial statement you can see that it is a statement that it has several meanings, and one of them is driven from a name of a Turin collective from Turin, Italy, who were very anti-racist and made different inscriptions as art, and then also they're drawn from like a series of works by Claire Fontaine. But in general, the title of the Biennale, everyone found it very vague. I don't know. What do you think, Lena?
Well, I would like to quote very fast one of the critics, and he wrote J. Clayton. He wrote recently, actually, his also opinion about the Biennale. He says, the phrase "foreigners everywhere" comes from a 2004 artwork by Claire Fontaine, reprised for the exhibition, but when blown up to a Biennale scale, the one-liner turns didactic and presumptuous. So Adriana Pedrosa organizes the show around two broad identity rubrics: queer and the indigenous artists. And in departure from the Biennale's usual emphasis on contemporary makers, more than half of the featured artists are deceased. I think probably that title he wanted to emphasize as these themes like decolonization, black art, African, the questions of African diaspora, indigenous art are sort of a foreigners or alien maybe, or really unknown and unstudied still now, even in the countries like Brazil, where I don't know, where Amazon forest, where half of the world indigenous tribes are located, and
Mhm.
people, the half of Brazil doesn't know about it. The situation with indigenous people is actually especially recent. I don't know, 10 years really get worse with Bolsonaro. If you know the right, extreme right wing ex-president of Brazil, made the situation even worse. And if we see actually this question of indigenous in Canada, because it's also a big community of indigenous people there, in US, it's really similar. So maybe he
Yeah,
wanted to use that a bit provocative word. I agree with you, but in terms of I don't know, draw attention that we are all our planet. We all have to be together, and the planet in the danger, as we know.
yeah. I think that was, well, that definitely was his intention, to sort of say that we're all foreigners to some extent somewhere. But then,
Exactly.
at the same time, I think the criticism that was there was that, of course, as you said, it is important to highlight the fact that especially indigenous groups and queer groups are underrepresented in the arts. I mean, they're probably underrepresented everywhere, but in the arts especially. Um, and by saying that, oh, we're all foreigners, it's in a way devaluing the fact that maybe not all foreigners are socially and politically equal at this point. And
Definitely, definitely.
also, another thing, which I don't know if he kind of envisioned it as a joke or not, but Venice, as we know it, is always full of tourists, and they're literally foreigners everywhere.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Actually, it's a good one. Probably, maybe it has a hidden connotation to this, because Venice exactly is a super tourist city, as everybody knows.
yeah, and even so, when I went for the opening, it was literally like moving through the crowds always. Like there are crowds of tourists everywhere. It is really um quite crazy. So I don't know if there was like a pun intended in the title, but
But maybe also this public or this curious tourists who are going to Venice, they probably take Venice Biennale as one of the places of interest, like a sightseeing, right? Because being Venice Biennale, I don't know, it's kind of a representation, is a representative image of the city called Venice.
yeah, it is one of the landmarks. I actually have not seen that many people. I mean, I've been only during the opening days, so there was like it was by invitation, so it wasn't open yet. But I guess a lot of tourists do also come to see Venice Biennale. Um, so there are foreigners all around, not just everywhere, but in all dimensions possible.
But
Um,
why? But and then what your impression as your visitor, na, and your witness of some of the art and pavilions? Why do you think? Why did you get that impression that it was vague? It's like you think it was lack of concept, or you didn't understand. Maybe it was not connection between pavilions, and should be actually that connection. Maybe no.
well, number one for me was the lack of sort of storytelling of foreigners everywhere. So there were a lot of artists that worked with similar topics, and it sort of felt like we were going on the same tracks through these ideas. Which I mean, repetition. Repetition is good, but not on such a large scale. So that was number one. Then also in terms of um, we know this curator by his shows that always promote some kind of social or political issues. And for this Biennale, I feel like it slightly under-delivered in terms of social and political issues. Maybe it's because, I mean, we ourselves, we do socially engaged art, but we do quite a radical version of it. Maybe it was just me wishing that it was a bit more radical and a bit more kind of in your face, telling about social issues and not just presenting pretty art which of course was there was a lot of very kind of bright pictures, and everyone was kind of taking Instagrams with it. And again, not really taking in the problems that the artist brought in. So that to me was a bit of a shame, because all of these artists have fascinating stories to tell about their lives and what they faced. Especially I was really impressed with the queer LGBTQA plus artists, the selection there. And it seemed like even the professional audience, which I most engaged with, they just treated it as like, oh, that's a pretty tapestry. Nice, lovely. So the curation to me, I mean, that's a question. It's either the Western ignorance or it's the curation that has failed, or it's a combination of both.
Yeah, it's a good question. But so you think that in terms of this social political discourse, because one of the main theme was decolonization, and also, as I understood, for example, Pavilion of Chile, they talk a lot about historic traumas of Pinochet, of the dictatorship.
Oh,
The
this pavilion I actually really loved. This is one of my
right?
favorite pavilions. That pavilion was great. And I think that when you when you branch out into the individual pavilions and not like the general exhibition that is there, the individual pavilions really, they kind of brought it to two groups. They either really went with the topic of the Biennale, and like the Chilean pavilion, they really did an amazing job. I really love that pavilion. Or on the other side, like for example, the Latvian pavilion, which I also liked, but it had nothing to do with the topic of the Biennale whatsoever.
But then again, you see, foreigners. The word foreign maybe reflects as well these misplaced people in any kind of community. So it could be marginals, it could be LGBT people, queer communities, migrants. There's a big issue as well in the whole Latin America, in US, in Europe right now,
Yeah.
right? So it actually maybe makes sense, but perhaps, yeah, perhaps it was lack of historic background, right? Like as you know, as I know, also the Austrian pavilion. There was a
Yeah.
Anna Yermolaeva, right? It's a Soviet
Mm-hmm.
Soviet artist. She, as I know, she immigrated, escaped from Soviet Union, you know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and she's talking. She made some performance or something like this, or kind of a piece or with a lot of Ukrainian artists, Russian, some former Soviet republics, right? Talking about the censorship, about oppression. So this is also
Yeah.
quite a hot topic even now, as we know, in terms
No,
of war,
definitely.
right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And this was one of the pavilions that actually I think ticked all of the boxes. So they went with this topic, but there were also some that just there was one, I don't remember which country's pavilion that was. They just had like large scale, colorful installation
Mm,
that in fact had nothing to do with the topics of marginalization and stuff. And to me that was a bit questionable, because it seemed like um, right in the moment when I'm starting to immerse in all of these issues, I'm going more into the like entertainment zone, which is not where you want to go. So yeah, there was a bit of there was a bit of this conflict,
mm.
and yeah, again, I wish it could be more radical in the delivery of the social issues, especially given the urgency of all of these issues, as we said already.
Well, maybe it also raise the question, the criteria for the selection of the artists for each country,
Oh,
right?
that's
That
true.
that
Yeah.
we don't know, and I don't know how it works. Well, we
Oh,
know
me
probably.
neither. No, we don't. I don't think. I think there's probably some kind of a very complicated process behind the scenes, which
Yeah,
um,
exactly, which actually shows as well the situation on the market of contemporary art. because as we know, the change as well, the changes what the contemporary art experiences are huge.
Yeah.
Nowadays it's very important the image of the artist, not even their art. So the art is becoming not everyone, no, I don't want to generalize, but I see a lot of tendency that very important, not the concept of your art, not what you want to try. People want to know who are you, what you represent. Are you
Yeah,
in a,
there's
in this era of canceling culture, of a lot of movements for
but also of
uh
celebrity culture
generation.
as well.
Exactly. So it's becoming a lot of confusion in the middle of uh, serious topics, I think.
Yeah, definitely. But maybe I'm a bit of a traditionalist, but I wish that the focus would still be on the art and and on the, I mean, of course the
I
artists
agree.
themselves, they have amazing stories, but I feel like the focus should be on the artwork, because this is ultimately what we're looking at. We're looking at the product of the artist's labor, of their, physical, intellectual, whatever, um labor. And of course it helps to know about the artist and their background and where they come from, but the artist, unless of course it's they are a performance artist, maybe shouldn't be at the center of their practice.
Yeah, and this medium as performance, performing art, installation, right now is one of the very I don't know, very spreading the medium in
Yeah,
the art scene, right? Like you recently went as well for art fair. Did you notice this as well?
I mean, I noticed it at the Biennale. I mean, the Biennale itself, the first piece that it opened with, it was a performance art piece. So I think,
Yeah, and
um,
I saw with the pavilion of Brazil that that indigenous artists were showing some of the performance. I think it's very amazing to express and to show the all richness and diversity uh, of something we know little. Actually, we have to confess we know really little about this art and this in the
mhm.
history actually.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I think that a lot of people, that when they visited the Biennale, they had the impression that the um, indigenous people in Brazil, for example, with the Brazilian artists, that they are in danger, which of course is true. But then also they got the impression that the LGBTQA plus artists are in very big danger. And here I want you to maybe expand a little bit. What is the situation like? Is there any kind of censorship in Brazil going on with this group of artists? Do they get included in the art spaces?
Yeah, so I mean, I can say by my experience living in São Paulo, right? Because São Paulo is not Brazil, right? It's very different,
Mhm.
like Moscow from the rest of Russia. And if we talk about São Paulo, the queer culture here won already. There are a lot of LGBT artists, a lot of trans personas artists who are, I wouldn't say well represented, but they have their place, they have a space, and they continue to fight, of course, for their voices. And but there are a lot of different areas, not only in art, in design, in architecture, where they can represent all kind of art talking about queer. Even I can say on my experience in 2018, I made a performance regarding my research, my doctorate research about space and people with the relation of people with the space of Minhocão. And one of my partner I called was a queer artist, Bruno Mendoza, who found a dialogue in terms of my research, was his topic where he talked about space and the city and urbanity via queer aesthetics.
Hmm. Oh
And
wow.
he made his own poetry based on his um, mm, reflections, talking about some traumas. So it was perfectly done, and it was nothing is called censorship.
Hmm.
But in the same time, Brazil has one of the highest, maybe even the first, place in statistics for murdering trans people.
Oh,
And
okay.
this is really weird, because I can see in the underground scene, uh, trans and travesti people. And in terms of like underground scene, I see that, I mean, maybe it's also my impression. We're all together. I'm always with collaborating, and I see it, the queer people. But yeah, half of the country is still very conservative, right wing, uh, and politically, it's still a lot of things to do. But again, if we compare with Russia, it's like, wow, moon and the sun.
Okay. So you could say that it is hard for an for a queer artist to get like a major show in a museum in Brazil, let's say outside of big cities
Of course,
like Rio and São Paulo.
of course, it's not easy, but it's hard for everyone, actually. I mean, obviously, Brazil is still very white centered country, where
Hmm.
all the elite, the rich people are white, have this European heritage, and roots and stuff like this. They always connected, all with the like with the best art circle for people. For black people, black artists, indigenous artists, queer women. It's hard for women as
Yeah.
well.
I think that it is quite important that maybe it will be useful to those who are non-Brazilian and watch this video, because while visiting the Venice Biennale, that's what I saw, a lot of the confusion regarding. I heard some comments like, why exhibit queer artists? Like they already have representation, but in fact, in Brazil and in the countries of South America, that might not be the case. And since the curator is from the region, he's bringing these contexts and showing that not everyone is on a European level yet.
Well, I know
So,
that Adriano Pedrosa worked, because he was co-curator of Biennale of São Paulo, which is also a very huge biennale after Venice Biennale in the world. He was co-curator in 2006, and with many events in Latin America. And always one of the central topics of his research, artistic research, is uh, working with diasporas, with traumas of diasporas.
mhm,
Again, with African heritage. For example, on that last Biennale of São Paulo, it was also a lot of accent on indigenous art, on the black art. So I think, uh, right now it has really it won its place, to talk about it. And queer art, I don't know, it's really, probably depends on the place. Maybe it would be harder to organize a big show, artistic show, in the northeast of Brazil,
mhm.
or in the, or maybe in the areas which is more, I don't know, a bit more far away. But again, I don't know. Right now, it's all mixed as well. So I think
Mhm.
they're always facing the challenges, um, of their representation. But I think this question is it's really weird now. Why to show queer art? I mean,
Yeah, I also
it's
found
like,
that
why
quite.
to show art? Why we even have to divide this? The more important is what the concept, what the, like the art, if there is message, I don't know, or if it's good or bad. That is important.
Yeah.
Aliens can do it, and maybe it will be amazing, or maybe shit.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Um, uh, I wanted to next and actually last move to the question that we have just discussed before we
Mm-hmm.
started filming this video, which was that you have read an article that has criticized the Biennale for being too folklore, which I also heard that people were saying, oh, there's too much kind of arts and crafts, which to me was a bit um, imperialist to say, but okay, or not okay. Um, and I feel like what people considered as sort of arts and crafts or folklore was the fact that the mediums that the artists use, they are not traditional canvases, they're not traditional, bronzes and marbles and everything.
Mm-hmm.
They're more of a down to earth things, and things that are accessible to communities that don't have very big funds to buy, expensive art supplies. So things like textiles. There were a lot of textiles, especially as you enter the Biennale. There's the main exhibition, not the national pavilions, but the exhibition. A lot of textiles. There was a lot of installations from found objects, for example, like the protective fencing that people put on their windows and on their doors. And I personally found it really, really interesting, and it was a very refreshing thing to see at an event such as the Venice Biennale. But overall, could you maybe comment on what are sort of primary medias that you would see in a gallery in Brazil? Is there like a lot of painters everywhere, or are textiles a very big part of Brazilian arts?
But I think they probably, I'm just it came to my mind, probably that also accent on the textile, for example, not to talk about fabrics and all different patterns. It has to do with this one of that theme of Biennale, which talked about diasporas and immigration. So
Yeah.
basically, maybe one of that question to show, do migrants, we always see migrants working so hard. Maybe it was that reference of as well the hard conditions of the people, that they also not have a lack of representations. For example, in Brazil, there is a word called quilombo. Quilombo, we can translate it like a war camp. So it's basically a Brazilian hinterland settlement founded by people of African origin, and there are a lot of quilombos all over the country. I went in
Mhm.
Bahia, the northeast, the state. I went also in some of quilombos in Maranhão, also very like
Mhm.
pre-Amazon state. And it's very interesting. You can see that people there work a lot with textile, with a lot of unique techniques, which we don't know. We have even no idea that it does exist. So I found it.
Mhm.
It's really not just interesting. It's very important to. It's like a hidden languages, or dead languages, which we have to. Uh, I don't know. We have to do something to spread it, or to study it, and give those people opportunity, space to represent it. So I think that kind of discourse, or folkloric or no, not us who have to decide about this. Probably, I mean, the importance is obvious. Then I don't know. Also, I cannot judge on Biennale, not because I haven't seen that part of the pavilions. But yeah, in terms of Brazil, you can find a lot of unique things uh,
Mhm.
regarding to this type of art.
I really liked your metaphor that those mediums are like hidden languages. I think that is definitely it. And that is a language that the audience of the Biennale wasn't familiar with, and I guess this is where the confusion comes from. But
But at the end, what do you think? If we conclude, you think that name, that title, "Foreigners Everywhere," is good or no?
I
But it's
think
kind of
it.
kitschy a bit now because it's a bit provocative.
I mean, maybe I would say that it is definitely provocative. I would still say that it is a bit vague in a sense that um, again, to me, it feels like it sort of almost makes me equal with the people that are being exhibited, since I'm the foreigner and I'm visiting the show, and these are foreigners that are also being exhibited in this show. But I feel like um, I'm nowhere near being equal to those people, and you shouldn't be feeling equal. You should be feeling this tension in the air that is there. You should be feeling the fact that those people come from very different backgrounds than you do, and you should be able to actually feel this difference and immerse yourselves in their stories and in this art and in these narratives. And in this sense, in this connotation of the title, I still feel that it could do better. But
But I think it's again shows a bit this post-colonial discourse and decolonization and all those unpopular topics as nationalism. Which country are you? Or what's your nationality? I mean, we still talk about this. We still make war about this.
yeah,
Uh, so maybe it could be like this. We are foreigners and we are proud of this.
yeah, we're all foreigners.
We're
Uh,
people, humans.
also, also maybe what I found quite amusing was there was this very big installation in Arsenale, where in different neon letters there were foreigners everywhere in different languages, and to
Hmm.
me this reminded a lot like the Soviet like Soviet murals, where you would have different like Soviet slogans, like
The плакаты, типа, да?
yeah,
Пропагандистские
like
плакаты.
yeah, like those like propaganda posters that would say something like "peace to the world" in all the
Yeah.
different languages, and then you would have these like cheerful working people.
Which are from visual. If we remove the propaganda meanings, no, and what is message behind from the visual art point of view, these posters were really good.
Oh yeah, I mean they have earned their place in the history of art. That is true.
And
But
I think Rodchenko started this, right?
yeah, and to me this kind of whole foreigners everywhere in different languages, and it's all being posted everywhere, it really reminded me this kind of Soviet propaganda. Maybe it's
That's
maybe
cool.
it's just maybe it's just my kind of cultural thing, but yeah,
We are Soviet kids. I mean, we were born there, not
yeah,
anymore.
that's not anymore. Where USSR has expired. All right, so I guess we have discussed all of the major kind of criticism that I've heard.
Maybe we can
We
put some links. No, then uh, if people will have
Yeah, to
some
some of the
questions.
articles that we have mentioned, we're going to put links, and also it would be great to hear what you think. I mean, you, the public, think
Exactly.
about this, about the Biennale, whether you have visited or not. Maybe you've seen some of the pictures online. Um, yeah, so we would love to hear some of your thoughts, because, of course, we're again two foreigners discussing context in
No,
Brazil.
exactly.
Even though Lena is almost local at this point,
Olá, Brasil. See you.
but still, yeah. So, yeah. thank you for enduring our conversation, and
Thanks a
see you
lot.
soon.
Спасибо и obrigada.